The sun was bright that morning and the schoolyard was full of noise and laughter. Students rushed in all directions, some with books in their hands, others chasing each other before the bell rang. Among them was Jake, a tall teenager with a reputation no one wanted, the school bully. He was angry again. His teacher had called his parents the day before because of another fight, and now everyone seemed to be avoiding him. He liked that. He thought fear made him look strong. As Jake leaned against the school gate with his friends, he saw a quiet old woman walking toward them. She wore a faded gray coat, her hands trembling slightly as she carried a heavy bag full of books. Her pace was slow and she seemed lost in thought. Some younger students made space for her, whispering softly, "She comes here every morning." Jake frowned. He didn't recognize her and didn't care who she was. His friend Luke laughed. "Maybe she's lost again. Old people shouldn't walk near schools." They all laughed, trying to act cool. But the woman didn't even look at them. She just kept walking, eyes on the ground, a soft smile on her lips as if she carried peace in her heart. That calmness annoyed Jake. Everything annoyed him that day. His breakfast had been cold. His teacher had ignored him. And now this silent old woman seemed to walk right through his group without fear, without even a glance. He muttered, "Watch where you're going, old lady." But she didn't reply. She moved past him slowly, brushing the edge of his sleeve by mistake. The touch was light, but it felt like a spark of insult to Jake's pride. His friends snickered, waiting for him to do something. Jake's jaw tightened. His heart pounded with irritation. Without thinking, he shoved her shoulder roughly. The old woman stumbled forward, her bag slipping from her hand. Books scattered across the pavement. Time froze for a moment. Students nearby gasped. One small girl cried out, "Hey, what are you doing?" Jake blinked, realizing what he had done, but it was too late. The woman didn't scream. She didn't even look angry. Slowly, she bent down, her knees trembling, to gather her books. One by one, she picked them up. A few students ran to help her. Jake's friends fell silent now, their laughter fading. Even Luke stepped back, whispering, "Dude, that was too much." Jake tried to hide his discomfort with a fake grin. "She should watch where she's going," he said, but no one laughed this time. The air around them had changed. It felt heavy, like everyone could feel something important had just happened. The woman stood up slowly, holding her books close. Her eyes met Jake's for the first time. They weren't angry. They were calm, sharp, and full of something Jake didn't understand. For a moment it felt like she could see through him, like she knew every wrong thing he'd ever done. She said nothing. She didn't raise her voice or call for help. She only gave a small nod as if saying, "I see you and I pity you." Then she turned and walked away toward the main building. Jake's throat went dry. He wanted to shout something, to act tough again, but his voice didn't come out. The crowd around him slowly began to whisper. Some pointed at him, others shook their heads. "That's the founder's wife," one boy whispered. Jake didn't hear it clearly, but the words reached his ears like a warning. He looked at his hands, realizing how rough his push had been. It was just a second of anger and a simple shove. But why did it feel so wrong? His friends began to move away from him, pretending not to be part of what happened. Jake stood there alone, feeling the strange mix of guilt and fear building in his chest. The school bell rang, breaking the silence. Everyone began to walk to their classes, but Jake couldn't move. His mind kept replaying the image of the old woman's eyes, calm but powerful, like she carried a story far deeper than anyone knew. A teacher rushed past him toward the woman, saying, "Mrs. Evelyn, are you all right?" That name hit Jake's ears like a thunderclap. He turned around quickly, staring at the teacher helping her inside. "Mrs. Evelyn? Who's that?" he thought. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't remember from where. As he stood there frozen, one of the girls from his class whispered to another, "That's the founder's wife. She comes here every week to read to the orphans." Jake's heart dropped. Founder's wife? He couldn't believe it. His stomach twisted. 10 seconds ago, he thought he was proving his strength. Now he felt smaller than ever. The woman he pushed wasn't just an ordinary visitor. She was someone important, maybe even sacred to this school. As she disappeared into the hallway, Jake noticed that the teachers bowed slightly when they passed her. Respect filled the air around her like a shield. She didn't demand it, she earned it. Jake felt cold. He wanted to run and apologize, but shame glued his feet to the ground. His face burned as a few students glanced at him with disgust. He knew he had crossed a line he could never undo. He walked slowly to his class, but his mind wasn't there. Every step echoed the same thought. Who is she really? And deep down, Jake already knew that this was not just another bad morning. It was the beginning of something that would change him forever. Jake could not forget the old woman's calm eyes. All through his first class, he stared at the board but didn't see a single word. Every time he blinked, he saw her, the quiet woman with trembling hands and that strange look that felt like she had looked deep into his soul. When the bell rang for break, students began whispering again. "Did you hear what happened this morning?" Someone said near the lockers. "Jake pushed that old woman," another replied. Jake clenched his fists, trying to act like he didn't care, but deep down his stomach twisted every time he heard his name. He walked outside, hoping to get some air. His friends were waiting near the canteen, laughing about something. "Hey man," Luke said, trying to sound casual. "That old lady, and I think you messed up big this time." Jake frowned. Why, she didn't even say anything. "It's over," but Luke shook his head. "Nah, dude. You don't get it. She's not just some random woman. A teacher called her Ma'am Evelyn. That's a big name here." Jake's heartbeat quickened. "So what, she's a teacher?" Luke hesitated. "No, man. She's like, important. I heard the janitor say she's the founder's wife or something." Jake froze. The words hit him like cold water. "Founder's wife?" He repeated, barely believing it. Before he could ask more, a voice shouted from behind. "Jake, principal's office now." Everyone around him went quiet. The boys stopped laughing. Even Luke stepped back a little. Jake's throat went dry. He looked toward the office building, its glass doors reflecting the morning sun. His legs suddenly felt heavy. As he walked, whispers followed him like shadows. "He's in big trouble," someone muttered. He pushed the founder's wife. She could get him expelled. Each word made his heart pound faster. His palms were sweaty and his chest felt tight. He had faced fights, warnings, even suspension. But this felt different. It wasn't fear of punishment. It was the shame that the whole school saw what he had done. When he reached the principal's office door, he stopped for a second. Through the glass, he could see her, the old woman, sitting calmly on a chair beside the principal's desk. She held her books neatly in her lap, her face peaceful, almost kind. Jake wanted to turn back. His legs begged him to run. But before he could, the principal's voice called, "Come in, Jake." He stepped inside slowly. The room smelled of old paper and coffee. The principal, Mr. Harris, looked serious but not angry. "Sit down," he said. Jake sat, eyes on the floor. He could feel the woman's calm gaze on him. The silence in the room was louder than any shouting. After a few seconds, the principal spoke softly. "Jake, do you know who this woman is?" Jake shook his head. He couldn't look up. "This is Mrs. Evelyn Moore," the principal continued, his tone full of respect. "She's the widow of the man who founded this school 30 years ago. She still visits every week to donate books to the library and talk to students about kindness." Jake's head snapped up. His mouth went dry. The woman who he had shoved to the ground had built this place. The classrooms, the playground, everything. She wasn't just a visitor. She was the school's heart. I didn't know." Jake stammered, his voice shaking. Mrs. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I know you didn't," she said in a calm voice. "But it's not about knowing who someone is. It's about how we treat those we don't know." Her words cut deep, not harsh, but painfully true. Jake's throat burned. He wanted to say sorry, but the words felt too small. The principal leaned back in his chair. "You've been given many chances, Jake. Fighting, bullying, name-calling. But this is something else." Jake stayed silent. He deserved every word. But before the principal could continue, Mrs. Evelyn raised her hand gently. "No punishment," she said softly. "Let him go." Jake's eyes widened. "What?" She turned to him, her wrinkled face warm and full of understanding. "Punishment changes behavior, but forgiveness changes the heart." For a moment, Jake couldn't breathe. The woman he had disrespected was protecting him. The principal sighed. "If that's your wish, Mrs. Evelyn, I'll honor it." He turned to Jake. "You're dismissed. But I hope you think deeply about today." Jake stood up slowly. He looked at Mrs. Evelyn again, guilt twisting his chest. I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. She nodded gently. "I know," she said. "Just promise me you'll use that strength of yours for something good next time." Jake nodded quickly, his eyes stinging. Then he walked out quietly, the sound of his shoes echoing down the empty hall. Outside, the whispers started again. "He's lucky," someone said. She forgave him, but Jake didn't feel lucky. He felt humbled. For the first time in his life, someone had looked past his anger and shown him mercy. As he sat alone on a bench near the playground, he watched other students laughing and helping each other. For the first time, he didn't feel like laughing. He felt like understanding. And in that quiet moment, he knew. He never wanted to be the person who made someone fall again. Jake sat quietly on the edge of his bed that night, unable to sleep. The old woman's words echoed in his head. Forgiveness changes the heart. He kept replaying the moment she looked into his eyes, calm and fearless, even after what he had done. For the first time in years, Jake felt something strange, guilt mixed with respect. The next morning, when he walked into school, everything felt different. Students were still whispering, but the tone had changed. Some looked at him curiously, others with pity. No one laughed. Jake didn't push anyone that day. He didn't shout or tease. He just wanted to stay quiet. When the first class ended, a message came through the speaker. "Jake Miller, report to the principal's office again." His heart sank. Again? He thought maybe Mrs. Evelyn had changed her mind. Maybe she wanted him punished now. Slowly, he made his way through the hall. Every step felt heavier. When he entered, Mrs. Evelyn was already there, sitting by the window with sunlight falling across her silver hair. She looked peaceful as always. The principal was not there this time, just her. Jake hesitated at the door. "You wanted to see me?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Come in, Jake, sit down." He sat, eyes fixed on the floor. Mrs. Evelyn smiled softly. "You look different today, quieter." Jake gave a small nod. I wanted to say sorry again. I really didn't mean." "I know," she interrupted gently. "But I didn't call you here for an apology. I wanted to tell you a story." He looked up, surprised. "A story?" She placed a small old photo frame on the desk. It showed a young man in a school uniform, standing proudly with a medal around his neck. "Do you know who this is?" she asked. Jake shook his head. "That's my husband," she said. "He built this school with his own hands. He believed that no child should feel small, no matter where they come from. Years ago, there was a fire in one of the classrooms. Instead of running, he ran inside to save the students. He never made it out." Jake's eyes widened. "He died saving them?" She nodded, her voice steady. "Yes. Since then, I come here every week to remind myself why he built this place, and not to punish but to guide, to show kindness even to those who forget it." Jake's throat felt tight. "And I shoved you," he whispered. "Yes," she said calmly. "But that's not what matters anymore. What matters is what you do after that moment. You see, Jake, we all stumble. The difference is whether we choose to stand up as better people or stay down as the same." He stayed silent, staring at the photo. For the first time, he felt small, not from fear, but from realizing how much good one person could carry inside them. After a long pause, Mrs. Evelyn spoke again. "You remind me of my son," she said softly. Jake blinked. "You have a son?" "I had," she corrected gently. "He passed away when he was your age. Angry, wild, lost in his own pain. You look like him. That's why I didn't get angry yesterday. I saw something familiar. A boy who's still trying to find his way." Jake's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say. He wanted to hide his face. Mrs. Evelyn leaned closer. "Do you know what I learned from all my years here, Jake? Strength doesn't come from fists or fear. It comes from how gently you can use your power." Her words hit deeper than any punishment ever could. Jake nodded slowly, tears burning behind his eyes. I'll try," he whispered. She smiled. "Don't try. Just start. Even small kindness changes the world a little." He looked at her hands, wrinkled but steady, and suddenly realized how much courage it must take for her to forgive someone like him. Before leaving, Jake turned to her one last time. "Mrs. Evelyn," he said, "I'll never forget what you said, ever." "I hope so," she replied warmly. "Now go, young man. You have a lot of good to do." When Jake stepped outside, the world felt brighter, somehow cleaner. The same students who once saw him as a bully now watched him quietly, waiting to see what he'd do next. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to prove himself. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed a little boy struggling to carry a pile of art supplies. Without thinking, Jake stepped forward and helped him. The boy looked surprised but smiled. That small act felt like a weight lifting from Jake's chest. He didn't know it yet, but this was the first of many small changes, the beginning of his transformation. And though Mrs. Evelyn didn't see it, somewhere in her calm heart, she already knew Jake would become the kind of person her husband once hoped every student here would be. That night, Jake couldn't sleep again. The old woman's story about her husband played over and over in his mind. How a man had run into fire to save children. How his wife still visited the same halls he once walked, carrying kindness instead of anger.
He kept asking himself, why would she forgive me?
The next morning, the sky was gray, and rain tapped softly against the classroom windows. Students were busy chatting when Mrs. Evelyn entered the room with the librarian, carrying a box of old books. Everyone stood in respect. Jake froze in his seat. He hadn't expected to see her again so soon. Mrs. Evelyn smiled warmly at the class. "Today," she said, "I want to share some stories your school was built upon." Her voice was gentle, but every word carried strength. She began to talk about courage, kindness, and how one small act can change a person's path. Jake listened quietly from the back. Her eyes met his once, but not with judgment, with quiet encouragement, like she wanted him to listen not as a student, but as someone who still had a chance to change. When the bell rang, most students left. But Jake stayed behind. He walked slowly toward her as she packed the books. "Mrs. Evelyn," he said softly, "can I help you with those?" She looked up, a small smile forming. "I'd like that." Together, they walked down the hall carrying the box. The hall was empty, only the sound of their steps echoing. "You know," she said after a moment, "my husband used to say no one is born cruel. Life just forgets to show them kindness." Jake nodded quietly. "I think I forgot too." They reached the library and she motioned for him to set the books down on a low shelf. When he bent down, one of the books slipped and fell open. The photo on the inside page made him stop. It showed the same man from her frame, her husband, standing with a group of children. Underneath the photo were the words, "Kindness is the strongest lesson of all." Jake stared at it for a long moment. "He built all this?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said, brushing dust off the shelf. "But more than the walls, he built hearts. He wanted a place where students learned to be strong and gentle. That's why I come here, to keep that dream alive." Jake swallowed hard. "You think someone like me can still change?" She turned to him with eyes that seemed to glow under the library light. "Jake, you already have. The moment you felt sorry, the moment you chose to stay and help instead of hide, that's change." He blinked, unsure what to say. "But I've hurt people," he whispered. "I can't just erase that." Mrs. Evelyn smiled faintly. "You can't erase the past, but you can outgrow it. You can write something better over it. Every time you help someone, you make the old pain smaller." Her words hit deep, stronger than any punishment or lecture. Jake felt tears sting his eyes, but he wiped them quickly. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Thank yourself for listening." As Jake helped her organize the last few books, the librarian approached. "Mrs. Evelyn," she said softly, "we've set up the donation table for the memorial event tomorrow. Will you be speaking again?" Mrs. Evelyn smiled. "If my voice allows, yes." Then she turned to Jake. "You should come too. It's not a punishment, just a story-sharing event." "I think you'll like it," Jake nodded quickly. "I'll be there." That evening, Jake told his parents everything, from the push to the forgiveness. His mother was silent for a while, then hugged him tightly. "You're learning something school can't teach, Jake," she said. His father, usually quiet, simply nodded. "Do right by her," he said. The next day, the school hall was filled with students, teachers, and even some parents. On the stage stood Mrs. Evelyn, her frail hands gripping the podium. Jake sat in the front row, his heart thudding. She spoke softly, but her voice reached everyone. "We live in a world where strength is often confused with cruelty," she said. "But true strength is kindness that doesn't break, even when tested." Her words filled the room with silence, the kind of silence that makes you listen with your heart. Then, suddenly, she looked directly at Jake and said, "Sometimes we meet people who remind us that even those who fall can rise higher than before. All they need is someone to believe in them. Jake's chest tightened. He didn't know if anyone else noticed, but he did. Those words were meant for him. When the event ended, Jake helped her off the stage. "You didn't have to say that," he murmured. "I wanted to," she said softly. "Because I believe you'll do good things, Jake. And maybe one day you'll tell your story to someone who needs it." He smiled for the first time in a long while. Not the proud fake grin he used to wear, but a small honest smile. For the first time, Jake felt like he wanted to be the kind of person she already believed he could be. And as they walked down the hallway together, side by side, it didn't feel like a punishment anymore. It felt like the start of something new. A friendship, a lesson, and a chance to rebuild his own story from the ashes of his past. The next morning came with golden light pouring through Jake's window. For once, he woke up before his alarm. He felt lighter. Not perfect, not fully changed, but lighter. The old guilt still sat somewhere deep inside him, but now it came with something new. Purpose. He wanted to do better. When Jake reached school, something strange happened. People didn't whisper about him anymore. A few classmates even nodded at him. It was small, but it mattered. He noticed a girl drop her books near the lockers. Without thinking, he knelt down to help her. She looked shocked at first, then smiled. Jake smiled back. At lunch, he sat alone under a tree. He didn't mind. He was thinking about Mrs. Evelyn. She hadn't come to school that morning, and he found himself missing her calm presence. He wondered if she was resting. Then, just before the final bell, a message came through the intercom. "All students, please gather in the auditorium." Jake's heart raced. He hurried there, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. When he entered, the room was silent. The principal stood at the podium holding a paper in his hand. His face looked sad. "I have some news to share," the principal said softly. "Mrs. Evelyn Moore has been admitted to the hospital this morning. She collapsed at home." A soft gasp went through the crowd. Jake felt his stomach drop. His hands turned cold. "She is stable," the principal continued, "but she needs rest. She has asked that her message from yesterday be shared once more, to remind everyone of kindness and second chances." The room was still, the silence heavy and sad. Jake's heart pounded in his ears. Without thinking, he stood up and left. He ran. Out the door, across the schoolyard, through the front gate. He didn't even tell the teachers. His chest burned as he ran down the street, heading toward the hospital a few blocks away. All he could think about were her words. "Every time you help someone, you make the old pain smaller." When he reached the hospital, he was out of breath. The nurse at the front desk looked at him curiously. "Are you family?" she asked. Jake hesitated. "No, I'm just someone who owes her a lot," the nurse softened. "Room 204, she's awake, but keep it short." Jake nodded and walked down the quiet hall. His heart raced faster with every step. When he pushed open the door, he saw her lying in bed, pale but smiling faintly. The window beside her let in soft sunlight, just like the one in her classroom. "Jake," she said softly, her voice weak but warm. "I knew you'd come." He walked closer, struggling to hold back tears. "You scared everyone," he said. She chuckled lightly. "Old bodies get tired, but hearts stay young when they forgive." Jake sat down beside her. "You shouldn't be here. You should be resting at home." "I'm fine, dear," she said, "but I needed to see you again. I didn't get to tell you the most important part of my story." He leaned forward. "What is it?" She looked at him, her eyes bright despite the weakness in her voice. "My husband's last words before the fire took him were, 'If kindness dies with me, then I've built nothing.' I've tried to live by those words ever since." Jake's throat tightened. "You didn't build nothing," he whispered. "You built this school, and you changed me." Her eyes softened. "Then my husband's dream lives on through you." There was a long silence. The monitor beeped softly beside her. Jake reached out and gently held her hand. "I'll make you proud," he said quietly. She smiled, the kind of smile that carried peace. "You already have, Jake. Remember, a single good choice can echo for a lifetime." Jake stayed by her side until she fell asleep. As he looked at her resting, he realized how fragile life was, and how much power one kind soul could hold. He stood up slowly and whispered, "Thank you. For everything." When he walked out of the hospital, the world outside looked different. The wind felt cleaner, the sunlight warmer. On the way back, he saw a small boy struggling to carry his backpack. Jake helped him, smiling when the boy said, "Thanks, mister." That night, Jake sat by his window and wrote in his notebook for the first time in years. The first line said, "Strength is not in the hands, but in the heart that forgives." He underlined it twice. Then he wrote again, "For Mrs. Evelyn and her husband who taught me how to be human." When he closed the notebook, his eyes were wet, but this time, not from guilt. From gratitude. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. The next time life tested him, he would choose kindness every single time. Days passed, and Mrs. Evelyn didn't return to school. The halls felt strangely quiet without her soft footsteps or gentle greetings. Even the students who barely noticed her before now spoke about her with respect. "She's the kindest person I've ever met," one girl said. "She forgave the guy who pushed her," another whispered. Everyone nodded. Jake listened to those words from a distance. They made his heart ache, but also warm. He'd begun helping around the school more, cleaning graffiti, picking up trash, carrying supplies for teachers. Small things no one had ever seen him do before. Some thought he was trying to impress the principal, but the truth was he wasn't doing it for anyone's approval. He was doing it for her. One afternoon, as Jake swept the hallway, the principal walked by. "Jake," he said kindly, "you've changed a lot. Mrs. Evelyn will be proud when she hears about this." Jake smiled faintly. "I hope she gets better soon, sir." "She's strong," the principal replied. "People like her don't fade easily." Later that day, Jake went to the library, her favorite place. The air smelled of old paper and polished wood. He sat in the corner where she used to sit, surrounded by the books she had donated. On the desk, he noticed a worn notebook with her name written neatly on the cover. E. Moore. His heart skipped. Carefully, he opened it. Inside were pages filled with her handwriting, short notes, ideas, and thoughts. But what caught his attention most was a sentence written on the first page. "If you want to heal the world, start with one heart at a time." Jake read it again and again. The words felt like a voice speaking directly to him. He turned the page and saw a list of names, all students who had once been in trouble, with small notes beside them like, "Learning to listen," "Improving slowly," "Heart of gold," just hidden. Then near the bottom he saw his own name, Jake Miller, lost, but not gone, his eyes filled with tears. She had seen something in him long before he ever saw it in himself. He closed the notebook, holding it against his chest. That night he couldn't sleep, so he made a decision. The next morning he met with the principal and asked permission to start something new, the Evelyn Club. "What's that?" the principal asked, raising an eyebrow. "A small group," Jake explained, "where students help others, the younger kids, janitors, teachers, anyone who needs a hand. Like Mrs. Evelyn used to do." The principal looked impressed. "That's a wonderful idea, Jake. She would love it." Within days, the club began. At first, only a few joined, students who'd once been troublemakers, just like Jake. They cleaned the playground, helped tutor younger students, even planted flowers in the schoolyard in Mrs. Evelyn's honor. The quiet transformation spread through the school like sunlight after a storm. Teachers began to smile more. Students started being kinder to one another. The same halls that once echoed with fights now filled with laughter. One afternoon, Jake stood by the garden, watering the small plants. A teacher approached with a letter in her hand. "Jake," she said softly, "this came from Mrs. Evelyn's nurse. She wanted you to have it." Jake took the envelope carefully, his heart pounding. He sat on a nearby bench and opened it. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Dear Jake, I heard about your club. I'm so proud of you. You remind me of my husband, and strong but gentle. The world needs more boys who can forgive and protect at the same time. Never forget, every kind act plants a seed, and someday those seeds become forests. With love, Mrs. Evelyn." Jake wiped a tear and smiled. The letter felt like sunlight on a cold day. He folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. That evening, as the sky turned orange, Jake looked around the garden and whispered, "You see this, Mrs. Evelyn? It's all because of you." A gentle wind rustled through the trees, and he smiled again as if the world had answered back. From that day on, Jake wasn't known as the school bully anymore. People called him something new, the boy who changed everything. And though Mrs. Evelyn was far away, her spirit lived in every act of kindness, every flower blooming in that little garden. and every heart she had quietly touched, starting with Jake's. A week later, the morning sun glowed over the school's garden where small flowers now danced in the wind. The same garden Jake and the Evelyn Club had planted in her honor. A wooden sign stood in front of it, painted by students. The Garden of Kindness, dedicated to Mrs. Evelyn Moore. Jake knelt by the soil, watering the tiny green shoots. Each flower reminded him of her, fragile, yet full of quiet strength. As he worked, the principal's voice came through the intercom. "Attention, students. We've received sad news this morning. Mrs. Evelyn Moore passed away peacefully last night." Everything stopped. The watering can slipped from Jake's hand, spilling onto the dirt. His heart froze. Around him, the schoolyard went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. He didn't cry right away. He just stood there, numb, staring at the flowers that now felt too quiet, too still. Then the tears came, slow and heavy. For the first time, he realized what true loss felt like. Losing someone who had changed his soul without ever asking for anything in return. Later that day, the school held an assembly. The hall was full. Teachers, students, even old staff members who hadn't been there in years. A photo of Mrs. Evelyn stood on the stage, surrounded by white lilies. The principal spoke first, voice trembling. "She built more than walls," he said. "She built hearts." Then he turned to the audience. Jake Miller would like to say a few words. Jake's knees felt weak as he walked to the stage. The same students who once feared him now looked at him with respect. He gripped the microphone, trying to steady his voice. "I don't know how to speak like she did," he began softly. "But I know what she taught me." He looked at her photo, eyes shining with tears. "I pushed her once. 10 seconds of stupidity that I'll never forget. But she forgave me, not with words, but with kindness. She showed me that forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger than anger ever could." The hall was silent. Even the teachers were wiping tears. Jake continued. "She believed I could change when no one else did. She didn't see what I was, and she saw what I could be. And because of her, I want to spend the rest of my life proving she was right." His voice broke as he took a deep breath. "She told me that every kind act plants a seed. So I promise you, Mrs. Evelyn, I'll keep planting." When he stepped down, people stood and clapped, not loudly but softly, respectfully. The kind of applause that meant something real. After the ceremony, Jake went to the garden again. The evening sky was painted in orange and purple. He placed a single white flower in the soil and whispered, "You didn't just forgive me. You raised me." A gentle wind blew across the garden, rustling the leaves. It felt like a whisper, her whisper, warm and proud. Years later, when Jake became a teacher at the same school, he kept his promise. Every new student learned about Mrs. Evelyn, about her husband, about the fire, and but most of all, about how one act of kindness can rewrite an entire story. And whenever a troubled student walked into his class, he would smile gently and say, "I know what it feels like to be lost, but you're not gone." Because Jake had learned the greatest truth of all, that sometimes the smallest shove in the wrong direction can lead to the biggest step toward becoming someone better. And though Mrs. Evelyn was gone, her lesson lived on, not written in books, but in hearts that still remembered her calm eyes, her quiet forgiveness, and her unshakable belief that even the roughest soul could bloom again. Years passed. Seasons changed. The school grew larger, newer buildings replacing the old ones, but in the center of it all still stood the Garden of Kindness. It had become a tradition. Every new student planted a single flower there during their first week. And above it, on a bronze plaque, were the words Mrs. Evelyn once wrote, "If you want to heal the world, start with one heart at a time." Jake, now older, stood beside that plaque wearing a teacher's badge on his chest. His students called him Mr. Miller, but some whispered his old story like a legend. He was once a bully, and the founder's wife changed his life. He never corrected them. Instead, he smiled quietly every time he heard her name. One crisp autumn morning, a boy named Liam entered Jake's class, a restless kid, full of anger and attitude just like Jake had once been. He pushed other students, made jokes during lessons, and never listened. The teachers were tired of him, but Jake saw something familiar in his eyes. That same fire, that same lost look. After class, Jake stopped him at the door. "Liam," he said gently, "you remind me of someone I used to know." The boy frowned. "Who?" Jake smiled faintly. "A boy who thought being feared was the same as being strong." Liam looked confused. What happened to him? Jake glanced out the window toward the garden. He met someone who taught him that kindness lasts longer than fear. For the next few weeks, Jake began spending time with the boy, not lecturing, not punishing, just listening. Slowly, Liam started changing. He helped carry chairs, stopped picking fights, even joined the Evelyn Club without being told to. One day, as they watered the flowers together, Liam asked, "Mr. Miller, do you think people really change?" Jake looked at the boy, the sunlight touching his face, and smiled. "I don't think it," he said softly. "I know it." That evening, Jake stayed late locking up the classrooms. As he passed through the hallway, he stopped by Mrs. Evelyn's framed photo that still hung beside the library doors. Dust shimmered in the warm light around it. He spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. "You were right, ma'am. One heart at a time." For a brief moment, he swore he could smell her favorite lavender perfume in the air. It made him smile. Outside, the garden glowed under the moonlight. The flowers, hundreds of them now, swayed gently in the breeze. Some were planted by students, others by teachers, but they all grew from the same seed of kindness she had planted years ago. Jake walked to the center of the garden and knelt down, brushing the soil with his fingers. "You see, Mrs. Evelyn?" he said softly. "The world didn't forget you. It just learned from you." The wind blew again, wrapping around him like an embrace. Somewhere in that quiet moment, it almost felt like her calm voice whispered back, "I never left, Jake. I just became the kindness you share." He stood up, smiling through misty eyes, watching the flowers dance in the night breeze. And so, the story that began with a cruel shove ended with generations of kindness. Proof that forgiveness doesn't just heal one person. It echoes through time. Every time a student planted a flower, they unknowingly became part of Mrs. Evelyn's legacy. And every time Jake told her story, the lesson grew stronger, that even the darkest mistake can bloom into something beautiful if met with compassion.